I shall just use clean water. The paper was dry to start with, so I've just added clean water there. I've got plenty of fresh paint out on my palette, so that's going to really help. So I'm just going to paint that sky negatively. I'm painting around where those clouds are going to be. Aim to leave more clouds than I want for now, because I'll end up losing most of them anyway. Lighter in tone as we get to the bottom here, so maybe just add a bit more water down here. And just a touch of that burnt sienna into that blue, just to make a slightly darker tone, or more of a muddier blue, just to put a few darks in here. But you see what I mean by leave more white paper than you wanted, because I've nearly lost it all. So a bit of blue, touch of that burnt sienna, and let's just throw in a few while the paper's wet. While it's wet like this, you can mess about with it. So just a few darker areas in the sky, just give it a little bit of texture, a bit of depth to it. Increase the contrast to the white areas of the clouds, and just be careful not to lose all your clouds. There you go. Paper starting to dry, so I need to stop. And just let that dry. If you let it dry naturally, you'll get a slightly different effect as using the hairdryer. So while I'm just waiting for that to dry, I'll just sort of talk to you about setting yourself up for success. That I've got in front of me printed a photograph and that grayscale. One of the best things I did was I purchased a printer that takes refillable cartridges, like this one here. It wasn't overly expensive, but I can print 1,000 pieces of paper for probably about 40 euros, whereas before I was buying those expensive cartridges that only last a few prints, and I was always worried about printing. So set yourself up for success. Plenty of paint out on your palette. We've got fresh paint here, all freshly squeezed out, lots of it. I don't mind printing on just normal normal printer paper. For oil painting, maybe I go for printing on photo paper to get those sort of colours. But I will just be looking at. In actual fact, I think it actually aids me to have not such a high quality print, because it eliminates a lot of detail. I shall switch to this is Skoda size 14. The brush I did that sky with was the Isabey number 4. The code on it is 62341, if you had to get in one of those. So while this paper's damp, let's go in with that distant hill. So slightly stronger paint. So the paper's still just damp, so I'll get a little bit of softness off in the distance there. And maybe a little bit of sparkle there, some houses off in the distance that are reflecting the light. Again, start with too many and then just take away the ones you don't want, but work fairly quickly, because you want this to look not overworked. And I'm going to take a bit of that yellow. That was a bit of yellow hands there from my previous painting, and I'm just going to go in here along the bottom just to give that a crisp edge. Just bring some of that green up over this here and let it paint wet into wet, but keep it blue over this side maybe. And then maybe a bit of yellow ochre. So keep it fairly light in tone, because we want to save our darks for the foreground. And again, just paint into that wet into wet. It's all about adding connection. So we need to paint the water now. So in with some cobalt blue. And I don't want to go too dark. We know it's just slightly darker than the sky. So just start with darker blue off here. And maybe a little bit of dry brush to add a bit of sparkle on the water. Clean brush, so just water on there now. And I can just use that to pull some of that blue across here, but almost white of the paper. Keep it nice and light in tone, because we will need dark against light here. So that's the water. So we'll go straight onto this hill here. So it's slightly closer to us, so we can go slightly stronger in paint and maybe more green. So again, like we did here, I'll mix on the paper. So we've got these green fields. Maybe just wash some of that off. Touch of yellow, it's a little bit too dark green. Let's just paint into there. And just using clean water. And I've got a workshop this Saturday. Well, today actually. This is Saturday challenge, so it's on today. There's still time to join. It starts at 4:30 French time. So have a look at my website if you want to join. But I do on the workshop go through, all the planning process for these paintings. So it's worth coming along to one of those and have a go, or even better, join the workshop tier on Patreon. You can actually go back and look at all the previous workshops. So wet into wet. This is all still damp here. So just putting in a suggestion of maybe trees and fields. But because it's so far away, that's what it is, a suggestion. And it gets darker down here, and the paper's still damp here, so we're going to get a little bit of softness. I could actually just help it along, maybe just a suggestion of a reflection in the water there. But, probably a good idea to get this filled in now. So more green, so warmer yellows, maybe a touch of cerulean blue. So although it looks very detailed here at the moment, there's no detail. I haven't painted any detail. It's just an illusion. So here's the field, and I'll be letting this dry and then going over it with some darker colours to create those fields and so on. I can paint down to here. Maybe a touch of red, just to put in just a bit of warmth there. And we can warm it up even further for the field here. Paint around those sheep because we want the white of the paper for those. Also you could resort to gouache if you accidentally paint over one of them, but white paper always looks better than gouache. Just going to paint into that yellow a bit more green. So again, just go around these shapes that could be sheep. Couple of sheep lying down there, and then we've got these bigger sheep here. So this is the importance of having that bead of water. Got to be careful not to go too dark with that grass area there. It's just possibly looking a little bit dark. So what I'm going to do is mix a bit of that yellow. I think that's Hansa yellow there. And just wash some of this off. Let it run down the page. It will give me some granulation as well. And that's basically just where the pigment is lifting out the fibers of the paper. Get some interesting effects. reload that brush with that yellow, and it's also just going to give me a little bit of texture in this foreground, make it a little bit more interesting because it's quite a large flat area with nothing going on. One last load of that yellow, and you could use cadmium yellow if you've not got hands of yellow. Just let that run down onto the paper. So need to let that dry now. So far so good. It just needs some darks now. That's all what's lacking. That's what we'll do. We'll add some darks. I'll start with some dark bluey green. I can connect this distant hill to these fields. We've already got connection here, but we can further connect it by just painting a few trees. This is dry paper I've got here. So these are hard marks, which I don't want, but I shall go over this with a bit of water in a moment just to soften them. So these are distant trees, maybe vary that colour slightly. Just give a bit of variation. And I'm looking at the reference picture, but also just making it up. Pull that across there as well. So to get rid of those hard edges, I've just rinsed my brush off, just take off most of the water so it's damp, and then I can just mess those up a little bit. Not too much, just enough to just soften those edges. But this is still wet, so I'll go straight now into slightly warmer green and paint a tree here, which will connect to there, maybe a field or a hedgerow there. So this is not as the reference picture is showing it, but it's fine. We can make it up. So some trees, a bit bigger as they come nearer these fields. It just gives that sense of space, and maybe make a darker field there. It's maybe got something in that field growing. This is still quite far away, so just a bit of water just to mess that up a little bit, just so it's not too distracting. So now we can go really dark and start to have some sharp edges. So thick paint, find that yellow ochre and the blue makes quite realistic looking greens. So we've got that distant something there in the lake, which is quite nice. Goes a little bit darker. And a dark here, which will just act as a bit of a stop. And nice strong dark there, so dark against the light. And so as soon as you put these darks in, the painting just comes to life. You've got to be patient and sort of build up to this and mix on the paper. Put some greens, dry brush, so we've got a fairly crisp edge along here. So I'm not using a lot of water on this brush, it's mainly paint, but this is why I need thick paint straight from the tubes, because you're always going to, I think, struggle with pans to get enough paint going. Well, I do anyway. And Go back in with that dark in here. Have a little bit of a light coming through there, so we can put some warmer greens on here, maybe just some yellow on its own. And it might be an idea to perhaps leave a bit of a gap here to allow the eye to travel through the painting. So hopefully you've enjoyed this painting demonstration so far, and if you give it a go, good luck. Don't forget to like and subscribe and try and grow this channel. This is a fairly new channel where I'm sharing some of my older videos that did quite well at the time, but obviously on my other channel I've moved on with different cameras and microphones, etc. And but I think they've still got a bit of value, so I thought I'd share them with you. And I'll share at the end of the video a little bit more information about that grayscale that I've talked about in the video, that I edited it off the front of the video, because if I don't go straight into painting, they don't tend to do so well on YouTube. But on membership on my website, I don't need to worry about the algorithm, so I give a lot more detail, and we also have a live stream as well, so we can talk in person. So if you want to join me on memberships, you can check the link in the description to my website. So let's get back onto this painting. Let's get it finished. We'll go with that. Maybe just make a couple of these just a little bit darker, and maybe make a decision which way is the sun going to go. We can have shadows coming off this way, which kind of makes more sense. In the reference, they're kind of coming across this way. So but you kind of got to make that decision, because you've got to stick with it throughout the painting. I'm not going to have many shadows, but maybe, you know, we could have a couple of shadows coming off these trees. Use a bit of clean water just to soften those. Making sort of long shadows across there. Just break that up a little bit. Tree there. Always a way to do repairs if you make a mistake. Not always. Don't need to fuss any more with that. That's enough information there. So the shape, we'll just have one there in the grass with his head. He's lying down to the shadow there. We know that shadows are coming across here. Another one there. Another one there. Another one there. That's just a bit of clean water. To connect those to the ground. And because this isn't a painting about shape, I don't need actually to paint any more detail maybe than just a suggestion there. Maybe I'll throw a little bit of warmth on them, but keep the white of the paper for the highlight. Opportunity maybe to have something in the sky. Maybe just have a bit of dappled sunlight from a tree here off the page. It's not visible in the painting, but because of the shadow, we'll know there's something there. Just use a bit of clean water to throw some stuff on there. If you start, you can't stop. All right, let's dry that off. So let's take the tape off. So here's a little bit of information about the grayscale that I sometimes use on my demonstrations, which you might find useful. And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe. This is my grayscale. So we can see that we've got the lightest tone in the sky, and the next lightest tone is the sort of the clouds, and then the water on the lake. And you can just see, you know, how everything in nature connects up, you know, and that's what I do in my paintings. I try to, you know, that the clouds are going to be connected to the sky is going to be connected to this distant hill connects to these hills that are closer, those hills connect to these fields connect to these trees, and these trees connect to this foreground. So everything has connection in nature. When we look at things, and that's what gives it that sort of realistic look to it. And what we want to avoid is a painting which has got clouds stuck in the sky, you know, a lake that has then hills stuck on, and we want it to have a wholeness to it. So I shall talk you through that.